Hi, I'm recording from Rojava, from the Internationalist Commune. I've been here nearly 6 months now, so this is my reflections based on this amount of time. It's really cool that you guys are linking up with us at Fast Forward Festival. So I'm going to try to give some political reflections. I know some friends from Xinhua and genealogy have already given some, and I actually don't really know what they've talked about. So maybe we'll echo each other in some ways, maybe we'll be very divergent, but that's one of the beautiful things about what's happening in Rojava, that there's a million sides to everything. So for transparency, I'm going to be basing this off of a letter I wrote to a bunch of dear political comrades back home with some of my major reflections about my time here and about how our political culture and political strategy could shift in the UK in order to take on board some strength and some learnings from the movement here. It's been really reassuring in some ways to see a lot of positive things that are echoed in the UK happening here. So it's not like it's worlds apart, but there's some really key points that I feel like we could learn from in order to strengthen our movement in the UK and to really adopt a revolutionary approach to political organising. So one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was our relationship with society. So here, one of the biggest critiques that the movement has of a lot of Western activism is that we distance ourselves from society. We kind of say, that's not my society. We say it's an us and them kind of dynamic, and we really, in some ways, look down on society. And not all groups fit this pattern. Like, for example, a group I've been involved in the UK, Take Back the City, I feel really embrace society. But most other groups I've been involved in have really talked a bit more about community. And that's, for me, an interesting distinction, because I think with community, you can be a bit more picky. So you can talk about the migrant community or ethnic minority communities or the queer communities or people who are a bit more like you or who can specifically align more with you. But with society, it's a lot more all-encompassing. And that's the whole point of having a revolutionary approach. You organize everybody and you forge unity through disagreement and conflict, and that's part of the process. So despite the fact that the movement here has like a really strong party line in a lot of ways, it organizes really broadly and really successfully with a lot of people who in no way actually fit that party line. So you kind of figure out who your actual enemies are. So here it's quite clear cut and straightforward. It's ISIS, it's the fascist states of Turkey, it's the Assad regime, it's the capitalists, and it's the state. And then anyone who's not that, you kind of take them together and you get the sort of lowest common denominator almost, for lack of a better word, and then somewhere between the space of your really strong political values and that lowest common denominator, that's where you organize and that's where you have conflict and disagreement. But outside of your red line is society. And that's who you're working with. Now, it's a lot harder, for example, in the UK or in London. You know, where do you draw your red line? Who are your allies? Do you include high-paid NGO workers? Do you include management consultants? Do you include people who vote for Brexit, but potentially, you know, aren't necessarily your enemy? So that's a really big discussion, but I think it's important to have that discussion, figure out where your red lines are, and then outside of that, stop being so picky and actually let yourself have those disagreements and allow yourself to be in unity with people who you actually really don't see politically eye to eye with. So pretty much not just capitulating to this kind of Thatcherite idea of there is no society, and not leaving society as lost, but actually almost reclaiming society and choosing that as our battleground. So this then leads you to contradictions. Where you have bits of the system which work against the system, or you kind of have these things which are quite difficult to resolve. So for example, in the autonomous administration of northeast Syria, also known as Rojava, it's organized from democratic confederalism. So you have all these neighborhood communes who then federate to each level until you get the whole region of the autonomous administration. So the basic building blocks of society, of the system, are these neighborhood communes. And some of these communes are really politicized neighborhoods where they come together and they really use the system in order to like promote like political cohesion and revolutionary values. Others of these units are actually tribes or clans who operate in a very undemocratic way. They kind of have inherited power systems. They don't get elected. They don't have a functioning local democracy. But they're still a unit that is able to slot into the democratic and federalist system. So you have some of these basic building blocks which don't encompass, agree with, or fight for the values of the revolution, and yet they are actually what makes the revolution work, and their participation is crucial because it's not a revolution for some people, it's a revolution for everyone. And those groups participate because they've identified that the revolution is strong enough, the movement is strong enough that actually it's their best way to access resources, political influence, having a voice, information, protection. So therefore they kind of have to participate, and then you just kind of work from there and see if you can move slowly into a more revolutionary direction. Which leads to education and building a militant or revolutionary personality. So a lot of this process of slowly moving, slowly changing society is done through education and done through an approach where you explicitly say you are educating people, you're organizing people. And I've seen really there's two different approaches in the UK. One in which people are really hesitant to see themselves as leaders, to see themselves as I'm educating people, and try to align themselves with the people. And then another approach which is a bit more top down, and you kind of really say, oh, those are the people we need to educate because they have no idea, and then through the process of education we will form them, we will shape them, we will lead them. And I feel like the movement here actually brings those two approaches really together quite well, because they say, yes, we are leaders, yes, we are the vanguard, but we are still with the people. So you are the vanguard, but on the same level. So you're teaching people, you're leading people, but you don't see yourself as separate from people. So it's a really interesting political balance in a lot of ways, and it's made me really rethink the concept of vanguardism and different ways that vanguardism can work and can't work. So it's amazing how much education the movement does here at a time when, Turkey is poised to attack across the border. There's ISIS sleeper cells attacking people, causing havoc through setting fires, cutting power lines. The Assad regime is still threatening military action against the region. So there's a lot of an economic embargo as well as really strangling the area economically. But at the same time, it is a huge focus on education on every level, from society to children to people who work in the movement to teachers. I mean, there's constantly educations going on. And people in the movement talk about how important it is to educate, because otherwise you're just placing a system on top of people, and people don't actually understand that they're not able to become political actors within the system. They can't actually reproduce the system and make it work. So a big part of that is recognizing the role of mentality and personality in this education. So there's a huge body of theory and philosophy about changing your personality in a way that I really haven't encountered in the UK or America. So there's a lot of, you need to kill the dominant man inside your head, you need to kill the capitalist inside your head, you need to kill the state inside your head, kill the fascist inside your head, and it's all of our responsibility as each other's comrades to help us do each other. So you do this through the process of critic and self-critic, TechMill, which most of you are probably familiar with, but also through processes like platforms where everyone focuses on one person and gives criticisms, through personal reflection, through reports, through reading, and through education. So that's still really different from, for example, call-out culture, where you call people out for harmful behaviors. And in some ways it's a lot deeper. You're not just saying you've got some patriarchal behaviors, you say your personality has elements in it which are patriarchal, bourgeois, fascist, capitalist, you name it, liberal, and you actually really go really deep in those criticisms. You're not just saying, can you change how you phrase your words? You're saying you need to fundamentally change how your brain works. And it's really intense and really hard to do this, but it's done in a spirit of love and support. And of course, mistakes are made, and sometimes people approach it through a spirit of harshness or anger or revenge. But from what I've seen, quite often those approaches are then criticized, and people are told, look, it's a duty of love to criticize your comrades. It's not coming out of a bad place in you, it's coming out of a loving place, because we believe in each other. We believe that everybody can be better. So you don't need to make excuses for why you're failing now. All you need to show is that you have the intention and the ability to keep on working and keep on improving. So it's almost more about the person you can be than the person you are now, because we're always in a lifelong process of change. And that especially means, though, that there isn't this unspoken thing where some people fit into a scene, an activist scene or a political scene, and some people don't, because things are actually just out in the open. If someone exhibits a behavior that isn't quite okay or uses words that aren't okay, then you just tell them, while at the same time actually being quite forgiving and trying to look a lot more about not just these superficial behaviors, but where's their heart coming from, like what's going on in their head, and trying to understand people a lot more. So I wanted to talk a little bit as well about the politics of hope and ambition, because I think, at least in my experience, I've seen a lot of campaigns or groups fall apart or fail because people lose hope. And I think this is a really big question when it comes to Jeremy Corbyn and the current Labour Party, and how in some ways it's quite dangerous because it robs us of a sense of us bringing the hope. It misplaces our hope and makes us put it into the system. And that's exactly why the system, the political system, allows people like Corbyn to exist. So we put all of our hope and all of our ambitions into the system instead of actually building something up outside of the system, which is what we need to do. Is we need to build our strength outside the system so then we can challenge it, not just engage on the ground where they set all the rules and they have all the power. So we really shouldn't let sort of fake radical politics like Corbyn distract us, just as we shouldn't let governments and corporations really set the agenda so that if they win a battle, we fall apart because we've pinned all of our hopes on getting this law passed or getting this climate agreement signed or getting this company to make a difference. So we need to put our hope and our vision, our ambition, our strategy outside of the system, engage in the system where it's tactical, but actually that shouldn't be where we put our hearts, because it's a distraction. And that's kind of where having that ability to trust each other, to trust ourselves and trust our vision and our ideology, which we don't really have enough of, I think, in the West, to really have this thing that we're fighting for, not just the things we're fighting against and reacting against. We need to have that trust in each other, and that trust is built through organizing together, through struggling together, through going through hard times together, and just being open with each other and criticizing each other, and really showing that you are invested in your comrades, your Haval's political development and personal development. Which is the kind of final thing about like things being hard and about struggling. We kind of joke around and say, oh, well, they wouldn't call it the struggle if it were easy. But I think on some level, in the West, we've forgotten how hard it's meant to be and how hard it's going to be. And we've forgotten that we shouldn't just do politics for when it's convenient, when it fits around our lives, when we have energy, when it suits us, but it's the hard stuff that matters. And I know that I've been really guilty of gravitating towards the political groups in which I'm actually like least challenged politically, where I agree with people the most, where I feel safe. And I think there's a lot of discussion we need to have about like what we mean by like safe spaces, what we mean by self-care, and how we create places which nurture us while not expecting our political arena to actually be made up of those spaces. And actually our main political arena is the place where it's the hardest, the place where we struggle the most. And then we have places to go to get strength and to recuperate. But self-care is not a word you hear very often here. It's not, having boundaries is not something that's very often here. You are expected to commit fully, and we don't talk about self-care because it's very individualized. There's a lot of mutual care. Society is a lot more collective. The movement takes care of you, and it's your responsibility to take care of your comrades. It's not so much your responsibility to take care of yourself in the way that we conceptualize it in the West. So of course you make sure that you are healthy and functional and you're able to like keep on fighting the next day, so you don't go into like a self-destructive way of being, but you don't take time out. Self-care doesn't mean taking time out, because you see the movement as something that nourishes you and strengthens you, because you're doing it together with your comrades, with your society, with your community, and not on your own. So if the activity and if the solutions we have are communal and not individualized, then these coping tactics should also not be individualized, and just really shows that how deep this kind of individualist and liberal culture has really impacted on how we do politics and how we conceptualize what it means to be cared for, what it means to be healthy. So at the same time, we really remember that in Rojava the movement holds a territory and runs an economy and a military, and therefore, you know, here we don't pay rent, we don't need to have a job, we can devote ourselves to self-development, the development of our comrades, and revolutionary action all day, every day. So of course it's very different, but I think sometimes we confuse our relationship with politics with the relationships we develop with our paid work, for example. So in the spirit of the movement here, I'm going to end with a quote from Serok Apo, which is just very simple and very powerful. And he says that in order to start to take action, you need to ask yourselves 3 questions. 1, what kind of world do we want to live in? 2, what do we have to do to get there? And 3, where do we start? So I wish you all luck in answering those questions during Fast Forward, and I look forward to joining you when I'm next back in the UK. Serkeftin!